Thanks for joining us on our streaming service for your First Alert Avalanche forecast. I'm your First Alert meteorologist, Callie Zanandri. And joining me now is Brian Lazar from the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. Brian, it's been a really slow start to the season. Based on historical totals, is there still time to catch up?
I was just looking at this yesterday, and I think this graph will explain that there is still hope. So I went back to all the SNOTEL records. This is statewide average snowpack going back to 1987. And I pulled up 5 years that most closely resemble where we sit here in the 2025-26 season. And you can see that on 4 of those 5 years, we did start to get snow in late January and early February and rebounded to very close to a long-term median. So they weren't great seasons, but they did end up being okay. Notably, the winter of 2002 and 2003 never recovered and was responsible for setting many of the all-time low snowfall periods. And we're going to hope that we are tracking on more of the 4 out of those 5 years and not that low 2002 and 2003 season.
Yeah, definitely fingers crossed for that. The good news is snow is in the forecast.
Snow is in the forecast, which is good. So here's what we're looking at. This is snowfall that's starting on Thursday. You can see that we're going to get a widespread, 6 to 10 inches across some large portions of the Colorado mountains, with some places, particularly maybe in the Park Range and those western Elk Mountains, maybe hitting a foot or more.
Now, the not so good news is that new snow is falling on very weak snow, resulting in increased avalanche danger. What should people be on the lookout for?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if we look at just what happened over our last couple storms since the new year, this is a bar chart of the number of avalanches by day. And you can see that the last 2 storms that we had led to an uptick in the amount of avalanche activity and increasing size. With the storm that's starting on Thursday, January 8th, we expect this to repeat, and we're going to see an uptick in avalanche danger Thursday in through Friday before we start tapering down over the weekend. And what that means is now we've got dangerous conditions that have spread to much more areas of the state. So we don't see as much green or low avalanche danger on the map as we did just a couple days ago. We have widespread moderate avalanche danger, which is indicated by those yellow colors. And we still have that most dangerous bullseye where we've got the deepest, most dangerous snowpack in the Elk and West Elk Mountains. And what is driving that is largely the persistent slab avalanche problem. So this is the avalanche problem that is failing on those buried persistent weak layers like you just mentioned. And what makes these avalanches really dangerous is they're hard to predict. They break across the terrain in really hard to predict ways, crossing ridge lines, breaking through the trees. You can trigger them from a distance or even from below. So you can see that these north-facing and east-facing slopes are the most dangerous. And those are going to require larger buffers when moving around avalanche terrain, including making sure that you're not below steep slopes, even if you're in flat or gentle terrain. And here is just snow profile that shows that we've got more than one weak layer to be concerned about in the snowpack. This varies depending on where you are in the state and at what elevation you are. But in the end, you've got some weak layers associated with crust that formed around Christmas. In higher elevations, those crusts might not be there, but you still have weak layers in the middle of the snowpack. And then we've got weak layers closer to the ground, and those avalanches can break on any of these persistent weak layers. Here's an example of a really large persistent slab avalanche in the West Elk Mountains that broke. You can see this one did not gouge down to the ground, so it was breaking on those mid-pack weak layers, but the size is getting quite impressive in these deeper snowpack areas. You can see how they're breaking across terrain features, crossing ridges and things like that. Here's an example from Treasure Mountain, right between Crested Butte near the Paradise Divide. And here's an example near Crested Butte from just yesterday, and you can see this avalanche broke on those weak layers near the ground. Another example closer to Vail are avalanches that broke on those mid-pack weak layers, but you can see that even those avalanches that don't break near the ground are quite dangerous. You can imagine how terrifying it would be to get washed to those cliffs and those rocks. The other thing that we have to worry about are these wind-drifted snow. This is a storm snow instability, which is due to the new accumulating and drifting snow. You can see that the avalanche problem for the wind slab avalanches is overlapping on north through southeast aspects. So those are going to be the most dangerous slopes north through southeast at near and above treeline elevation bands. And here's what these wind slab avalanches look like. You're going to find the most pronounced wind drifting right at or just below ridgeline or terrain breaks, and even avalanches in the storm snow can grow big enough to be a threat. Here's a really good example of a wind-loaded pocket that this skier was able to trigger as soon as he started to approach steeper terrain.
Now, I know a lot of skiers and riders, backcountry users are going to be excited to get out there and take advantage of some of the fresh snow we are expecting. What should folks be on the lookout for?
Yeah, so the one thing, particularly with the persistent slab avalanche problem is you'll often get audible collapsing or whooping sounds. That's a clear indication of unstable snow. To the eye, both avalanche problems, the persistent slab avalanche and wind slab avalanche problems, can and will produce shooting cracks in the snowpack, and that's a really good indication that you found stiffer layers of snow that are going to have weak layers underneath them. So when you start to see shooting cracks or hear audible collapsing and whooping sounds, that means you need to move to more gentle terrain. Southerly facing slopes at lower elevations do offer safer riding options.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Brian, and we will see you back here next week for your First Alert Avalanche Report.
Thank you. See you next week.